So that's where things stand at this time, and I thought we'd invite Lindsay Shepherd here to continue with her story. Lovely to meet you.
All right. Hi, everybody. So today I want to talk about the top 4 things that I have learned as a campus free speech advocate. I think my experience with this is interesting because prior to the events of November 2017, free speech was not something I really cared about, and it was not something I really thought about whatsoever. So before I started my master's degree at Wilfrid Laurier University, where I got in trouble for showing a clip of Jordan Peterson in one of my tutorials and being neutral in regards to his stance on gender-neutral pronouns, I was someone who believed that those who advocate for free speech or start free speech clubs are people who have really vile opinions and just want to be able to spew them. I didn't think about free speech beyond that. That's how I know that people whose opinions are quite orthodox and mainstream are generally not going to be the ones that vocally defend free speech. So that brings me to the first thing I learned, that there is a conscious effort to get people in line by associating free speech with white supremacy, transphobia, racism, and other forms of bigotry. The politically correct totalitarians genuinely view free speech as a gateway to those things. And so they try to push this idea that you would have no reason to defend free speech unless you are secretly a racist or a transphobe or an Islamophobe. So in other words, if you're a good person, you don't need free speech. Anyone who does stand up for it must have an ulterior motive. Just the other day, I saw a professor tweet that about how free speech is just a cover for upholding white male dominance. This goes back to the idea that most people don't think we have a free speech problem at all. I was one of those people 1 year ago. Back in March 2017, my mom showed me a news article about Jordan Peterson and how he was speaking at McMaster University, and his speech was drowned out by air horns and chanting of protesters. And I didn't think it was that big of a deal because at the time, it didn't resonate with me that these people are stifling and suppressing speech, and moreover, they think they are heroes for doing that. The second thing I learned is that our universities, specifically the humanities and social science departments, are ideologically homogenous. If you have a genuine and honest commitment to free speech, it generally means you have a commitment to truth-seeking. And in order to seek truth, a free and open exchange of ideas is required. So if you start to say that some topics are off limits, some topics are not up for debate, you are limiting the truth-seeking process. So I was told, for instance, that the issue of gender-neutral pronouns is not up for debate, because by discussing the grammar of gender-neutral pronouns, so using they, them in the singular, using sie and zer, you're actually questioning the existence and the lives of trans people, and that is hate. Therefore, some things can simply not be discussed because they are too controversial. Of course, this is fundamentally counter to the mission of the university, which is to explore and evaluate different ideas. When the message gets across that there is a right way and a wrong way to think, you're going to get university students who feel that they must ideologically conform, and conformity obviously stifles people and their abilities. The third thing I learned is that safe space culture on university campuses is economically motivated. So when I first looked into this phenomenon of safe spaces and noticed how so many people are saying that university campuses and classrooms must be safe spaces, I just kind of thought these people are losers. Because by safe space, they don't mean a place where you're physically safe. They mean a place where everyone is oversensitive, no one challenges each other's ideas, and no one brings up anything that other people might not want to hear. So, and I think this idea does have value in some circumstances. So take like an LGBTQ center. People who go to that center don't want to be confronted by someone who's going to come in and say, I don't think you should have the right to get married. Same with an abortion clinic. A woman who's about to get an abortion probably doesn't want to have a robust pro-life versus pro-choice debate while she's waiting in that clinic, right? But the university classroom can simply never be a safe space, because there needs to be an allowance for open inquiry and free expression. In classrooms, we need to be able to debate and discuss things that some people might be offended by. However, the safe space phenomenon is actually a little bit more complicated than that. Canadian universities actually advertise that they are safe and comfortable learning environments, and I'm sure I don't need to repeat the platitude that universities are businesses. Therefore, if students are demanding safe spaces, the universities will recalibrate campus culture in order to accommodate that. In addition, the idea that we should always be affirmed and our self-confidence should never be tested is starting in the elementary schools. So the idea that we must always be comfortable, never be confronted with anything we don't want to hear, this will be the atmosphere that children grow up with, and they will come to expect it not only from the universities, but from their workplaces and from society at large as well. The fourth thing I learned is that free speech is becoming a partisan issue, which I find very unfortunate. When my case went public in November, the leader of the Conservative Party, Andrew Scheer, he brought it up in Parliament and asked the Liberals to denounce what had happened. But they didn't. Instead, one of the ministers said something vague about how free speech is good, but hate has no place in Canadian society. So I'm afraid that the Liberals, the NDP, and the Greens, they're buying into this idea that the only people who care about free speech are bad and scary people, because they will barely touch the issue. And in the recent Ontario election, we saw the Ontario Progressive Conservatives claim that they will promise to protect free speech on campus. However, I emphasize that it's really not in anyone's interest for only one side of the political spectrum to champion free speech, because it really is everyone's issue. After all, it is one of the fundamental freedoms in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Thank you.
Well done, Lindsay. Want to take a picture? So these are obviously generational things, because when I arrived at university, McGill University, the chancellor at a major assembly gave a speech and said, look to your right, look to your left. One of you isn't going to be here next year, and another one isn't going to be here the year after that, making clear the point that competition is important, that you have to work hard, you have to fight for your place. It's not a comfortable place, it's a place you have to earn. And then at class after class after class, we were informed that being at university meant that everything you believed in was likely to be challenged. And here we are, a couple generations later, everything is on its head. So now that you've begun your crusade, tell me, are you mobilizing any measure of support, or are you a lonely voice?
I think I'm mobilizing support. I mean, I've started a group called the Laurier Society for Open Inquiry. We're hoping to bring the culture of open inquiry back on campus. Because, I read a book recently. It's called Speaking Freely by Keith Whittington, and he says it's not a crisis yet, but we really need to focus right now on bringing back these liberal values, right?
But when you read about this idea of safe places and of trigger warnings and microaggressions, you think, where is Aislinn? It just needs a little satire, doesn't it? Yeah. All right. It's lovely to see you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I know you're very much in demand.
Thank you.